They killed Big Bertha. That bass came to my dock every morning for 3 straight years. I named her, fed her breadcrumbs, and watched her grow from a curious little thing into an 8-pound legend. She was my morning peace, my reminder that life out here still had something pure left in it. Now she's floating belly up with 200 other fish, the water reeking of death and chemicals. The sunrise should have smelled like honeysuckle and spring dew, but instead it stung my nose with copper sulfate and decay. My lake, once clear enough to see minnows dart beneath the dock, now glowed the color of antifreeze. And standing at the edge of that poisoned water, holding Bertha's slimy body in my hands, I knew one thing for sure. Vivian Blackwater had finally gone too far. I'm Marcus Reed. I'm 52 years old, a retired electrician turned solar installer. My family's land sits just outside Pine Ridge, North Carolina. A good 12 acres with an old spring-fed lake right in the middle. Been in my family since 1952. My grandfather called it God's mirror, and I swear, on calm mornings, it still looks that way. The dock's wood is rough and warm under my palms, polished smooth from 3 generations of fishermen. Every morning, I walk that gravel path down from the house. The rocks crunch under my boots, the air smells clean and damp with pine and honeysuckle, and the world feels quiet except for frogs croaking and the low hum of dragonflies. It used to be paradise until the developers came. 15 years ago, the tobacco fields around here got sold off. In their place rose Willow Creek Estates, 847 McMansions, all identical, all shiny, all sitting around my lake like buzzards around a carcass. They offered me millions to sell. I told them to go build their golf course in hell. Most of the new neighbors were fine, polite, curious, maybe waved when they jogged by. But then came Vivian Blackwater. Imagine a woman who looks like she came straight from a real estate commercial. Perfect hair, white Lexus cleaner than a hospital floor, voice sharp enough to slice glass. She carries a leather folder to barbecues and throws around phrases like community standards and aesthetic compliance. The kind who probably schedules her morning coffee 5 days ahead. Within 6 months, she crowned herself HOA president, and everything went downhill from there. Her first improvement plan arrived by certified mail, official letterhead, signature, and all. It said my unsightly fishing activities were disrupting the tranquil enjoyment of the neighborhood. Her $800,000 lakefront view, she claimed, was being compromised by my personal recreation. You ever get so mad you laugh? That's exactly what I did. My dock had stood there since Eisenhower was president. My granddad built it with his own 2 hands. So I called my lawyer buddy Tom Martinez. He's been around longer than half the judges in this county. He read her complaint, snorted, and said, "Marcus, she's trying to use laws that don't even apply to you. Your property predates the HOA. You're untouchable." That should have been the end of it. But Vivian doesn't know what the word end means. When the legal letters didn't work, she tried harassment. Every morning when I'd grab my rod and walk down to the lake, her landscaping crew would roar to life. Leaf blowers, chainsaws, diesel mowers, all lined up right along the property line. The air would fill with exhaust, drowning out the birds, turning that sweet morning breeze into something that smelled like a truck stop. But I kept fishing. Some people build fences. I cast lines. Then she called the county, claiming my dock was illegal. The poor inspector showed up, checked my permits from 1987, and actually apologized for wasting my time. I could see the pity in his eyes, the kind of look you give someone forced to deal with a lunatic. 2 weeks later, Vivian escalated again. This time, she hired a professional surveyor, a whole crew with shiny vests and laser equipment that probably cost more than my pickup. They spent 6 hours measuring a boundary that's been set in stone since Truman was president. 3 days after that circus, I got a letter claiming my dock extended 6 inches onto, quote, community water rights. 6 inches. And with that, she filed an official lawsuit over 6 inches of dock. That's when I realized Vivian wasn't just controlling. She was obsessed. While her lawsuit crawled through the courts, she started a smear campaign online. The Willow Creek Facebook group lit up with posts about the difficult man who refuses to respect HOA standards. My name became gossip at wine nights and book clubs. She even told people I was hurting property values. But here's the thing about trying to ruin a man who knows how to dig through county records. You better pray your paperwork's clean. One weekend, I drove down to the courthouse, that old brick building that smells like dust and yellowed paper. I spent 6 hours digging through files older than both of us. And what I found changed everything. Turns out, my grandfather didn't just buy the land. He bought the water rights. Every drop of that lake, surface and underground, belonged to our family. The 1952 deed spelled it out in black ink, including all water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground springs and tributaries there too. I laughed out loud right there in that dusty room, because the same spring feeding my lake also supplies Vivian's fancy subdivision. Every faucet, every shower, every lawn sprinkler, they all run on water that legally belongs to me. When I told Tom, he laughed so hard he spilled coffee all over his paperwork. "Marcus," he said, "you don't just have a defense, you've got a nuclear bomb." So we hit back. We filed a countersuit for harassment and slander. And just to make sure it landed with proper flair, we had the sheriff's deputy deliver the papers right in the middle of one of Vivian's high society dinner parties. Imagine 40 HOA elites in pastel clothes, sipping champagne, when a uniformed deputy walks through the gate, saying, "Ma'am, I need you to sign for these court documents." The silence was worth more than the deed itself. Her smile cracked like thin glass. "This is harassment," she shouted. "That redneck is trying to intimidate me." And that's when I knew Vivian Blackwater wasn't going to stop until something exploded. Problem for her? She was the one standing on the dynamite. The next morning, I found a note tucked under my truck's windshield wiper. Plain paper. No signature. Just 6 words scrawled in angry handwriting. "Stop fishing or face the consequences." The wind caught the edge of the note and flapped it against the glass like it was laughing at me. I crumpled it in my fist, tossed it into the trash barrel by my porch, and tried to shake off the unease. But deep down, I knew. Vivian wasn't bluffing anymore. She was getting desperate. Within a week, my quiet property turned into a government carnival. First came the county inspector again, clipboard, badge, and a look of embarrassment. "Sorry, Mr. Reed, just doing my job," he said. Behind him rolled up a van from Fish and Wildlife. They said they had to, quote, "investigate potential interference with migratory bird activity," because apparently, according to some anonymous complaint, my fishing was confusing ducks. Then came the EPA, hazmat suits, gloves, masks, the whole 9 yards. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, mixed with the earthy scent of pine and mud. They poked around my lake, collected water samples, and left shaking their heads. "Nothing wrong here, sir," one of them muttered before leaving. That's when I realized Vivian had turned her little neighborhood committee into a personal army. Every agency she could think of, county, state, even federal, she sicked them all on me, and all it did was make me more determined. Because now, I wasn't just some guy defending his fishing dock. I was a man standing up against a bully with too much power and no limits. Then one afternoon, while I was replacing solar panels on my workshop roof, a voice called from below. "Marcus Reed." I looked down to see a gray-haired woman holding a manila folder, her thick glasses sliding down her nose. She introduced herself as Dolores Martinez, retired county clerk. "I heard what's happening to you," she said, "and I think I have something you'll want to see." Over coffee that smelled like burnt caramel, she told me everything. "The developer who built Willow Creek Estates?" she said, flipping through her old records. "He got his permits by promising to preserve all natural water features. That lake of yours, protected wetlands, federal law." Her eyes gleamed behind the glasses. "If they're dumping anything in that water, it's a violation." I sat back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight. "Dolores," I said slowly, "you're telling me Vivian's been breaking federal law?" "Breaking it?" she said, sipping her coffee and dancing on its grave. That night, I became a one-man surveillance team. I set up a trail camera facing the lake, bought a used drone off Craigslist, and woke up before dawn for 2 straight weeks, hiding in the tree line like a hunter waiting for his prey. And just like clockwork, they came. Vivian's landscaping crew. Same diesel-belching trucks, same guys running mowers and blowers, but now I saw what they were really doing. They were dumping trash bags full of grass clippings, fertilizer, and yard waste straight into the lake. The splash echoed across the still morning water, the smell of diesel and cut grass mixing with the faint sweetness of honeysuckle. By the 3rd Saturday, I had the perfect shot. Time-stamped, GPS-tagged photos showing Vivian's husband's company, Pristine Landscaping LLC, dumping waste into a federally protected water source. When I ran the company name through state business records, my jaw hit the floor. Richard Blackwater, Vivian's husband, was a 40% owner. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up printing copies of every photo, every timestamp, every license plate number. Monday morning, I walked straight into the EPA regional office and filed a formal complaint. The clerk at the front desk blinked at the pile of evidence I handed her. "Oh, they're gonna love this," she said under her breath. By Wednesday, Pristine Landscaping was under federal investigation. By Friday, they'd lost 3 county contracts. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I sat on my porch that evening, the sky glowing orange as cicadas buzzed in the pines, and sipped my coffee while watching the lake shimmer under the fading light. But peace doesn't last long when your enemy's ego is bigger than her sense. The following week, I found a business card wedged under my windshield. The logo read, Clearwater Solutions, a commercial algae control company. The paper smelled faintly of chlorine. I stared at it for a long moment before it hit me. She wasn't done. She was escalating. While I was out of town that weekend visiting Sandra's sister, Vivian made her move. She called Clearwater Solutions and lied, saying the lake was community property suffering from an emergency algae bloom. She paid $3,500 in cash for an overnight treatment. When I got home Sunday evening, the smell hit me before I even opened my truck door. It was sharp and metallic, burning the inside of my nose. Copper sulfate mixed with the stench of rotting fish. The lake shimmered unnatural green, like liquid poison under the setting sun. I dropped my tools and ran down to the dock. Big Bertha floated 20 feet from shore, her scales dull, her mouth gaping toward the sky. Around her drifted hundreds of dead fish, bass, bluegill, catfish, all lifeless. My lake was dead. My throat tightened. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped my phone as I called the county environmental emergency line. Officer Jim Patterson, who'd been handling illegal dumping for 15 years, arrived within the hour. He stepped out of his truck, took one look at the water, and swore under his breath. "Don't touch anything," he said, pulling on gloves. "We'll test it." The air filled with the smell of chemicals and decay as his team tested the water. The strips turned dark blue, almost purple. Patterson's jaw clenched. "Industrial-grade copper sulfate," he said grimly. "Whoever did this just sterilized your lake, 2 to 3 years before anything can live here again." He looked at me. "This isn't vandalism, Mr. Reed. This is felony destruction of property, possibly federal." That night, I sat on my dock under the porch light, the air heavy with the scent of death and chemicals. The moonlight glimmered on still, lifeless water. No croaks, no splashes, no birds, just silence. And as I stared at the reflection of my darkened house in that poisoned lake, one thought burned in my mind. Vivian thought she'd finally won, but she had no idea the same water she'd poisoned was the very water running through her own neighborhood's pipes. And soon, she and all 847 homes were going to taste the consequences. The morning after the poisoning, I couldn't shake the smell. Even from my kitchen, that sharp metallic scent of copper sulfate drifted through the open windows, clinging to the curtains in the back of my throat. I sent a sample of my lake water to an independent lab. When the report came back 2 days later, my hands shook reading it. Copper sulfate levels 4 times higher than the EPA's safe limit for drinking water. That's when everything clicked. The same underground spring feeding my lake flows right under Willow Creek Estates, which means Vivian hadn't just poisoned my lake. She'd poisoned her entire neighborhood's water supply. Her fancy subdivision with manicured lawns and luxury kitchens was now drinking the same toxic brew that killed Big Bertha. I called Tom Martinez, my lawyer, and told him everything. He went silent for so long I thought the call dropped. Then he said, "Marcus, you don't just have a case. You've got a bomb that's about to go off in court." We needed proof. Solid, airtight, government-grade proof. So I brought in an environmental lawyer from Raleigh, Rebecca Torres, and a hydrogeologist, Dr. James Mitchell. Rebecca was calm and sharp, the kind of woman who could make a courtroom feel like her living room. Dr. Mitchell looked like a friendly old science teacher, but the man could tear through data like a shark through water. We spent hours by the dead lake as Dr. Mitchell set up his testing gear. The smell of chlorine still lingered in the mud as he measured groundwater flow. His results confirmed everything. "The contamination's spreading," he said, squinting at his tablet. "Every well in that subdivision pulls from this aquifer. Within 6 weeks, all 847 homes will have toxic water." Rebecca's eyes gleamed. "Then we hit them with everything: environmental contamination, water rights theft, and criminal negligence." And we weren't alone. Dolores, that retired county clerk, showed up at my place with more paperwork than a courtroom could hold. "Marcus," she said, "the developer who built that subdivision never bought your family's water rights. Those homeowners have been stealing from you for 15 years. She slid a yellow document across my table. "That's your deed," she said. "You don't just own the land. You own every drop of water beneath it." It was all right there, in black ink, from 1952. All water rights, surface and subsurface, to underground spring system and tributaries thereto in perpetuity. Forever. Mine. That night, sitting under the porch light, I could hear the frogs starting to return. Maybe 1 or 2. It was small, but it meant life wasn't gone forever. I promised myself that neither Vivian nor anyone else would ever harm this place again. Rebecca filed everything: civil suit, criminal complaint, EPA alert, and state-level environmental violation. Sarah Morgan, a journalist friend of hers, took one look at the evidence and said, "This is national news." She wasn't wrong. HOA president poisons entire neighborhood's water supply. The headline practically wrote itself. Meanwhile, Vivian tried to cover her tracks. She called the algae company, begging them to lose their paperwork. They refused and recorded the whole conversation. Then she tried hiring a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. He got arrested trying to break into my truck at the hardware store. The woman was unraveling, but her biggest mistake came when she showed up at my door one evening, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle and gasoline from her Lexus still running. She stood there in her designer clothes, holding a leather briefcase. "Marcus," she said, voice trembling but trying to sound calm, "we can end this quietly. $100,000. Cash." She opened the case. Stacks of hundreds, neatly arranged. The smell of new money filled the air. What she didn't know was that I was wearing a wire. North Carolina's a one-party consent state. Tom's idea. I smiled. "You're offering me money to hide the fact that you poisoned my lake and contaminated your neighborhood's water?" Her smile vanished. "I'm offering you a reasonable settlement." "Reasonable?" I said. "That's one word for bribery." Her eyes turned cold. "You'll regret this, Marcus. I have connections." "Then use them," I said, and closed the door. By the next week, the EPA had stepped in officially. Federal agents tested water from every home in Willow Creek Estates. The results were terrifying: contamination across the board. Parents started reporting stomach pain in their kids, headaches, rashes. The county issued an emergency notice: do not drink or use tap water until further testing. Panic hit the neighborhood like wildfire. Homeowners flooded the HOA's Facebook group with complaints and photos of brown-tinted water. And there she was, Vivian, posting an official statement blaming natural minerals and seasonal groundwater changes. But lies have an expiration date. When the EPA traced the contamination back to the lake and Clearwater Solutions service records, the truth blew open. And the truth, as it turned out, was a federal crime. The next community meeting at the Pine Ridge Center was standing room only. 300 angry residents packed into a space meant for 200. The air was hot, thick with tension and burnt coffee. News cameras lined the back wall. Vivian sat up front, pale as marble, clutching her folder like a shield. I sat 3 rows back with Rebecca, Dr. Mitchell, and Sarah. The EPA representative took the stage first, presenting their findings on a projector. Copper sulfate contamination originated from this lake, she said, pointing at a red dot on the map. The source of dumping was verified by video and testimony. All eyes turned toward Vivian. Then Patricia Morgan, the new acting HOA president, stood and said, "Mr. Marcus Reed, the floor is yours." Quote, I walked up to the microphone. The room fell silent. Cameras turned. "My name's Marcus Reed," I said. "This lake has been in my family since 1952. The same lake your homes pull water from. For months I've been harassed, sued, and attacked because I like to fish on my own property. Then Mrs. Blackwater decided to poison that lake." Vivian jumped up. "That's slander!" she shouted. The sheriff stepped forward. "Sit down, ma'am." I held up the original deed. "My grandfather didn't just buy the land, he bought the water rights. Every drop you've used for 15 years legally belongs to me. I could charge every household back payments worth millions." Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." "But I won't," I continued. "You're not my enemy. One person is. And she's the reason your kids have been drinking poison." Rebecca handed over the EPA's report, the service receipts, the recordings, and the bribery tape. The sheriff read them, then turned to Vivian. "Mrs. Blackwater," he said calmly, "you're under arrest for environmental crimes, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her perfect smile cracked for the last time. "This is a setup! He's lying! You'll all regret this!" she screamed as deputies cuffed her wrists and led her out. The cameras flashed. The crowd erupted. 6 months later, I stood on my dock again. The air smelled clean. The water shimmered clear, and small base fingerlings darted near the surface. The EPA helped fund restoration. The HOA, now under new leadership, paid for bioremediation and restocking. My lake lived again. We even started a community fishing program for local kids. Every Saturday morning, families line up along the dock. Laughter, the plunk of lines hitting water, the smell of sunscreen and fresh air. It all reminds me that peace is possible when people stand together. Vivian served 3 years in federal prison. Her law license is gone, her marriage ended, and her name is now a national example of HOA corruption. And me? I still fish every morning. The same gravel path, the same sunrise, the same old dock. Only now, sometimes, I hear children laughing nearby, the sound of a community that learned something the hard way. Justice doesn't always come fast, but when it does, it's cleaner than spring water.